This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome, I'm Phil McKinney. Today's show is going to be a look behind the scenes around the time when I took over as CTO at Hewlett Packard. So I'm going to roll back the clock to a time way back when I was being promoted or moved into this role at Hewlett Packard. Now, why is this time frame so important? Why it's so important is that is the time frame, and that's when I came up with this concept that I called then, and I still call today, the Innovation Program Office. And why did I take that strategy and that approach? What are the pros and cons of an IPO? What are some of the things you need to think about regarding the IPO? And will it work for you? Now, since that time, there's been a number of articles written about my time at HP and the Innovation Program Office. But what I wanted to share with you, my listeners, is some of the things that have never been discussed in any of the articles. So this is to give you kind of really down and dirty, in the dirt kind of struggles and challenges and things to look out for. And if I could do it over again, things I would have done differently during that time frame. But I think the concept of an Innovation Program Office still applies today. And hopefully at the end of today's show, you will have your own insight into how does it or could it apply to what you are trying to do in the organizations that you serve. So let's think about going back to that time frame. So we're talking, 2005-ish, 6-ish, 7-ish kind of a time frame. Innovation, albeit it was kind of catching on, it wasn't quite the buzzword bingo it is today. And a lot of organizations were just going out and creating innovation teams. They would say, we have a chief innovation officer, which was kind of the new title back then, and they would drop people into that role, and they would give them some money, and off they would go at that point. But at that, the real challenges for that was that painted a target on people's back, and that there was this perception that says, hey, it's no longer my job in product development or in marketing or in sales to think about innovation because we now have this team. It's their job. Therefore, because they are innovation, it's their responsibility. It's not my responsibility. And what a lot of organizations experienced was that it was hard to scale. You put in a chief innovation officer, how much money are you going to give them and how big of a staff they're going to have? And if they're operating completely independently of the rest of the organization, how much impact can they really have? And scaling really is the key factor. Scale limits impact. If you can't scale it, the size of your impact is not going to be as significant. And look, innovation is not about a team of people where you have a chief innovation officer and someone in charge of hardware innovation or software innovation or marketing innovation. No. Innovation is not about a team of people. Innovation is around a capability that an organization can and should have as just part of that core of how you do things. It's not some special project because some manager read a book over the weekend. It should just become part of the core values, the core capability of an organization. Now, in the case of building a team, let's say you are going to go forward and build a team that's not focused on being the ones that do the innovation, but a team that enables innovation in the organization. It doesn't matter how you define that. The key is that new team is going to need to show innovation value as soon as possible, and sooner if you can, right? And think about it. You're given this new role. You're saying, oh, guess what? We want you to lead, quote, this ability to help us be more innovative. You got to show value right away with a near zero members of team. You might be the only person. You may not have not another single person in your organization. And most likely, you will have zero or near zero funding. Yet, you need to show an early win. Congratulations, you're now in charge of innovation. It happened to me. It has happened to hundreds of thousands of other innovation leaders ahead of you. If you're expecting to be able to be dropped into an organization with the approval to go hire 200 people and you're going to have hundreds of millions of dollars of funding, it just doesn't happen. That maybe make for a good movie script, but it's just not the reality of innovation. Why isn't it, though? Why shouldn't you have that expectation? Well, for one, most of the senior executives in an organization, and I'm talking the CEO, the chief operating officer, the CFO, the C-suite people, most cases, they are scared to death. It's an unknown. They have this perception that it cannot be managed. They don't want to throw a bunch of dollars in and not be able to show a return to their board or to the shareholders or whoever, right? So they, persuade someone to come in and take over and become this innovation leader with no resources, no help, no funding, and expect magic to happen. And then when it fails, they go, well, see, don't worry, we didn't put a lot of money behind it. It was just kind of a little side experiment. So the key here is that as the leader, you need to go out right away and you need to go secure some early wins. And we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. So one way to get that early win, though, is get others to support. As I've said, innovation is not having a team that's called innovation. It's about the leaders of innovation within the organization being an enabler, helping others to be highly innovative, helping others be successful and get the wins. So how do you get others to support you, particularly early on? Let them get credit for the early wins and be viewed as a resource to help. And then let the group benefit. Let them get the credit for the new product or the increase in revenue or marketplace credit or PR. Right? If you're in the innovation game and it's all about you and you getting the credit, the odds of you being successful in this game is near zero, if not zero. So let me give you an example. Right before I took over as CTO at HP, I ran into one of the engineers at HP working in the desktop PC product group named Tom Saliga. And I was just chatting. He didn't know who I was. He'd heard that I'd gotten, asked to take on the CTO role, but we'd never met. He didn't have any background or context. And he and I were actually in a group. We're getting ready to get on a plane to fly to do some due diligence on a possible acquisition. And I asked Tom, I said, so what project are you working on that your manager knows nothing about? And he looks at me and is like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. What project are you working on that your manager has no clue? And he grabs me by the arm and pulls me aside, and we stand outside of ear range of the rest of the team, and he starts describing this product. And he basically built a motherboard and stole parts from a supply cabinet, and he built this amazing high-performing PC. So I stepped in, and I said, great, let me help you. So I helped the product group secure additional funding beyond their project, so there's a win. Expertise about the new market was not inside of our organization, so I actually went out and secured an acquisition to bring that expertise inside the organization without using any product group budget win. So I helped them get resources. That was a win. Merged that new acquisition with the new product to form an entirely new product line. That's a win. Helped the product group launch that new product. That was a win. It turned into a highly successful product launch with significant credit to the broader HP organization. And there was the win. Now, the win all went to everybody else. It went to the product group. Even Mark Hurd CEO at HP glommed on to want to get credit. In fact, I think it's the only email I ever got directly from Mark Hurd where he said, "Good job." And that was when we announced the acquisition and we announced the strategy. So what was this? This turned into HP Gaming. You can go out to HP.com now and find HP Gaming. Its products include things like Envy, Omen. And it was a result of the work that was already being done, led by Tom Saliga, who's now a retired engineer from HP, and the acquisition of Voodoo PC, run by Rahul Sood, and the success we had in establishing HP in the gaming product line. So that just gives you one example. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. We're going to discuss more about the role of the Innovation Program Office and my experiences down in the dirt at HP. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation on what is an Innovation Program Office and giving you some insights behind the scenes of my experience establishing the IPO at Hewlett-Packard. So what we're going to talk about now is really what is the role of the IPO. And the role of an IPO takes on many different forms, but it basically consists of establishing the innovation framework, defining the metrics, securing the funding, project selection and tracking, and then training and supporting the teams as they innovate. So let's walk through each one of these. Framework. First thing is, as an IPO, the IPO needs to establish the innovation framework that the broader organization will align with. You've heard me rant on this before. I'm not a big process guy. And I believe that each team, each organization, each division should be able to establish their own tweaks and spins on process. Framework, however, is important. The framework I use, FIRE, F-I-R-E, focus, ideation, ranking, execution, easy to remember. But underneath that, ideation, you can use brainstorming, you can use electronic suggestion boxing, you can do open calls for idea submissions as form of competitions, any way that you process that works for you. But you have to have a framework. And at HP, and actually now at thousands of organizations have glommed on to FIRE, is the focus, ideation, ranking, and execution. That is the framework. You have to adapt it to the language of the organization. Now, I'd been in the innovation game for many years, even before I joined HP. In fact, before I joined HP as an employee, I was actually helping HP craft its innovation strategy, and had come in and done a bunch of facilitated brainstorming sessions on entirely new kinds of products, etc. And this is around the time of Carly having done the Compaq acquisition. But you need to adapt it. Even though I had my own language, I had to adapt it to the language and culture of HP. And then I have to get others to adopt it, and that's a form of change management process. Now, it was a gradual rollout just to get the framework established. It took 2 years, and at the end of 2 years, we had probably about 20,000 employees. That was one division of HP, all aligned around the framework. Next up was metrics. Once you've got the framework in place, you got to be able to measure it. You got to show leadership that you can, measure it and manage it. You need to, step one is understand how the executives make decisions, and then adapt your metrics to help them make the right decisions. So test your metrics, come up with some alpha version, and then test them. Test them against yourself, go back in history and see what the metrics would have told you, and also against your peers. Who's your competition? And does it reveal something? If you have the info in the past, would you have made different decisions than where you're at today? Your objective in the metric is to find them that are, one, predictive of future challenges and opportunities. Metric, measuring yourself in the past, it's interesting. That's what auditors do. That's what accountants do. Your innovation. You're looking for a metric that helps you guide you to decision points in the future. Something that will allow you to make a decision now that will have ultimately give you enough impact. And also, one of the objectives of a metric is to satisfy the fear response from the executives. Executives, as I said in the last segment, they suffer from fear. It's why they're not going to give you 200 people and $100 million to go build from scratch an innovation team. It's just not going to happen. It's not the reality. You need to prove to management that innovation can be managed and that you're the person. You are that person who can manage innovation for them and make that successful. Number 3, funding. The key with funding in the IPO, at least for me at HP, was to move it from underneath the normal budget process and control. Now, once you have your metrics, it's much easier to secure the dollars. You can show them how this is how we managed it. This is, if you took our metrics and applied it backwards, here's what it would tell us. Here's how we're going to manage it going forward. You reduce that fear element. That's where you're going to secure the dollars. Now, in the case of funding, start small, prove, and then grow the funding. Do not ask for more dollars after a big win. Number one mistake I see innovators do. They get a little bit of funding, they get a huge win, and now they think that's the time I should go to the CEO and get double my funding. See what I did? Give me that money. Give me that as my reward. Do not ask for more dollars after a big win. You will get a bad response, and I'm speaking from personal experience. Executives look at that big win as a return on their investment that they already made in you. They're covering your salary, they're covering other things, right? They look at it as just the expected return. Instead, position your request as, with X dollars, I can deliver even a larger return. Don't do it as credit for the past. Tell the story of, if you do this, I will even give you a bigger return. And remember, you are competing for dollars inside your organization that could be used in other ways. So you have to show that value. And never take the attitude that they should automatically put X dollars against innovation. Don't try that game. Don't pull out a report from Harvard Business. Do not do that. Your credibility will go out the window. Next is project selection and tracking. Define the criteria for project selection. We use ranking questions, create your own, and reevaluate the selection process to improve how you identify the projects that will have the biggest impact. And then you have to offer training and support. Now, once you have everything in place, once you have the framework, you've got the metrics, you've secured a little bit of funding, you've got a process for project selection and tracking, you then need to roll it out and scale it across the organization. And you cannot do this like a hammer saying, I am the chief innovation officer and we hereby will do X. You have got to get it to the point where they think it's their idea. Let them have the credit. Let the, in my case, we had CTOs in the product line. So a CTO for laptops and a CTO for desktops and a CTO for printers and a CTO, you have to let that CTO in that organization take credit for it. That head of the division gets credit for it, not you, right? But by establishing a framework, the metrics, a funding mechanism, and then project selection and tracking, that is fundamentally the core role of an innovation program office, right? And with this, with the establishment of an IPO, and we'll talk about this a little in the next segment about now, how do you facilitate and become that enabler of innovation? You're not the doer. There's nothing in here I said was do innovation. You establish the framework, which makes it helping skill people up to do innovation. You establish the metrics. Everybody understands what does success look like. You secure the dollars that others will use to do the innovation. You help them select ideas. You be part of that process. And then you do the training. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more on IPO. Welcome back. In this segment, we're going to talk about two fundamental areas regarding the IPO. One is impact, and the other is, how do you pitch it? How do you think about getting an organization convinced to put an IPO in place. So let's talk about impact. One is an IPO is about transforming the approach. It's not about being the innovators, but instead being the enablers of innovation. Keep the IPO team small. Avoid being viewed or perceived as competition to others in the organization. Everybody wants to do innovation, and if they're not, they take that as a slight. Now, it's not about doing, it is about enabling. It's about helping others do the innovation work. So at HP, we have 240,000 staff. IPO was never bigger than 35 people. Now, we provided the funding that was outside of the budgets of the organization. So anybody that had a really good idea knew that I had funding, knew I had ready access to funding, and knew that we would make very fast decisions to make that funding available to them. Something that just doesn't happen inside of an organization of 240,000 people. Teams do not need to go and compete for monies against already product lines. Part of the reason why we did the funding the way we did was trying to compete with a new idea that wouldn't really be profitable for 2 to 4 years, having to compete against a product line that was generating revenue and profit today. And that's always a hard decision for product groups. The other benefit of of funding coming from IPO was it was off the radar from their management team, since the money wasn't coming from them. So they didn't, have to report to their management about the spending of those dollars and what was that return. We treated that within the IPO. And then we spread the money freely. We showed that we were willing to fund things that even, I may not see as possibly being successful. And believe me, there were a lot of those. Where someone else said, oh, no, this is a great idea. We funded it. And I'm like, I don't see it. And I was wrong. It just reinforced to me that I was not a good proxy for what was good, what was a good idea, what could be a winning product. So let me talk to you real quick about a PSG case study. PSG stands for Personal Systems Group in the HP nomenclature, so that would have been PCs, laptops, displays, mobile phones, and calculators. At this time, I took over as CTO at HP October 1st, 2005, or at least I was supposed to. Instead, I found myself in New Orleans at the request of the White House on the recovery of Katrina. I flew in, was sleeping in my sleeping bag in the back of flatbed trailer trucks because you could not sleep on the ground in New Orleans. And basically, I built a wireless network to allow the New Orleans citizens and the Army National Guard to operate in the city with no infrastructure. Now, when I finally did get back to Palo Alto, I was way behind, right? Here I was named as the CTO. The White House negotiates with HP to get me released. And now I am out, gone in Katrina, no phone, no connectivity. In fact, I was building the connectivity, and I was already behind. I had to build a staff. I had to establish roadmaps as part of my CTO role, and I had to stem losses. PSG was losing $1 billion a year, and was number 3 or number 4 in market share for any of its products. And my concept at the IPO really became the cornerstone. It's not about building an innovation team. I didn't have enough dollars because we were losing $1 billion. I had to build a team to enable everyone in the organization to become the innovators that would transform the organization. And I had to stay behind the scenes. I had to let others stand in front and take the credit. And that was all part of the strategy. So how do I convince leadership? What was the pitch? One was identify the challenges the org was going to face without an innovation capability. There was a lot of speed of change, new products, changing customers, what were the customers' needs and demands for products and services. In the case of PSG, the transformation of what is a PC and how often people bought new PCs and what they use them for. There were market expectations, and the competitors were changing. You had Dell, you had Lenovo, you had, at that time, we still had Gateway, you had Acer, which was pretty small at that time, you had Apple, right? So you had to identify the challenges the organization was going to face without an innovation capability. If we did nothing, what would happen? We would go from losing $1 billion to $1.2 billion to losing $1.5 billion. We'd jump, and we continue to lose market share. Then I had to draft and get alignment around a problem statement that the organization could rally around. How do you excite 20,000 people to get energized rather than just sitting back and letting things happen to them, to say, no, we're not going to let this happen and we're going to go win? You can do that by the BHAG, Bold, Hairy, Audacious Goal, or you could define a problem statement. Whatever it is, you got to come up with a target, a mission, something that is bigger than an individual within the organization. It really is something that the organization takes on. So what was ours? We took on the pretty bold plan to become number one in market share across all product lines and have the highest profitability in the industry. Typically, those are trade-offs. I can be highly profitable, right? But I won't be number one because I'll be priced out of the market. I could be number one and lose money, right? Those were typically, people thought it was an either-or situation. And what we said was no, it's an and situation. We want to become number one market share across all product lines and have the highest profitability in the industry. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, what do your executives want? The people that have got to make your decision. Once you've established this goal, what is it they want? Now, understand everybody has a boss. CEO has a boss. It's the board. CTO has a boss. It's the CEO, right? In fact, the CTO, in many cases, has lots of bosses. Everyone wants to look good to their boss. It's human nature. So how are you going to help them look good to their boss? And how can you model true partnership and focus on that goal? Look, the people you're trying to help, they want to be the hero. Let them be viewed as the hero. So then what do you want? You want to show what you can do. You want to show what the power of innovation is within your organization. You want to show success and impact. You want to transform an organization. Trust me, there is nothing more satisfying than being able to go into an organization of significant size and scale and have a meaningful, big impact. And you should not want to be viewed as the hero. You want to be viewed as the guide. Let the other person be the hero. Let the executive be the hero that you're working with. You want to be the guide. And how do you want to structure? Then you have to think about, how do you structure it so everyone gets what they want? Focused on the agreed problem statement, or the BHAG. In our case, number one. And that is actually exactly what we want. We want it to be number one. And you do not forget what they want. Each decision you make, you should ask yourself, number one, does this help solve the problem statement or achieve the BHAG? Number two, does this help them achieve what they want? Number three, does it help you achieve what you want? You may not be able to check off all three boxes all the time. You may need to sacrifice what you want for the bigger good. But you go in with it, eyes open. Okay? So again, impact, keep the IPO small, never more than 35 people in the case of 240,000 employees at HP. Right? So I hope today's discussion has helped you understand the role of the IPO with both the impact and the pitch. The IPO is an important resource, whether you create it as a separate team, run it as a virtual team with members scattered across your organization, or you use support from outside resources. Organizations that do not put in place something akin to the IPO will find themselves struggling and with an increased likelihood that their innovation efforts would fail. A recent study showed that 70% of organizations who attempt to create an innovation as a capability fail at doing so. 70% failure rate. And in my experience, building an IPO and engaging the rest of the organization has proven highly successful. How successful? Within 2 years of establishing and getting the IPO fully operational within PSG, the projects that came out of IPO led to being named on Fast Company's 50 Most Innovative 3 years in a row. And within 2 years, HP went from losing $1 billion and being number 3 and number 4 in market share to making $4 billion, highest profitability in the industry, and being number 1 in all product lines. Trust me, IPO works. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break with a new episode of 5 Minutes to New Ideas. Also, check out the show notes over at Killer Innovations. I'll have some links. There have been 2 case studies at Stanford University and Harvard Business School written about the HP Innovation Program Office. Feel free to hop on over to Stanford and Harvard and read those case studies. Other than that, we'll be right back after this quick break. Back in the early days of this show, I would share what I called a killer question in each episode. These questions were designed to be used in your personal, team, or organization's innovation efforts. Now, based on feedback from listeners just like you, we've decided to bring it back with some improvements. Each episode of the Killer Innovations has a segment that I'm now calling 5 Minutes to New Ideas. It's designed for the creative mind looking for that next great idea. Each episode will challenge you to think differently about yourself, your business, and your products and services by asking unique, funny, and sometimes crazy questions. These questions are designed to force you to look beyond the obvious and to uncover ideas and opportunities you never before considered. So, get out your notebook and be ready to uncover that game-changing idea. Here is 5 Minutes to New Ideas. There is an old saying that goes something like this: speaking with passion but without the facts is like making a beautiful dive into an empty pool. As John Adams famously said, facts are stubborn things, and whatever you may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. To convince or persuade others to support your idea, you have to base your idea on incontestable facts that are readily grasped and understood. When it comes to taking your idea and turning it into a disruptive innovation, you need to get people to support and even fund your idea. The willingness of others to support your idea is based on your personal credibility, and the easiest way to lose your credibility is to run fast and loose with the facts. I've seen many an innovator thinking they needed to make some bold claims and then proceeded to stretch the truth. Their idea was fundable on its own, but they lost their credibility and support, and thus their funding. If the facts are more of a hypothesis, then you should be upfront and say something like, "in my opinion." Ben Franklin was a great one for that. He said that one of the greatest lessons he ever learned in winning others to his ideas was to begin everything he said with the words, "I may be wrong about this, but it seems to me," and the combination of humbleness of attitude linked with overwhelming logic quickly had people assuring him that he was absolutely right. To take the stand that you're right before the hypothesis has had the time to be turned into facts will make sure others will oppose you and your idea. It's also a sign of immaturity. Speaking with passion but without the facts is like making that beautiful dive into that empty swimming pool. And it has brought many otherwise intelligent people into positions of embarrassment, or worse, even disaster. We've all been guilty of it. I know I have, and still am on occasion, and I'm always sorry afterwards, especially if I'm proven wrong. It seems to me are magic words. They soften and clear the way. They open others' minds and initial opinions toward us and our ideas. And then, if we are proved wrong, we are not so far out on the limb that we can't get back with good grace. But more important than the escape route, it ensures we are not offending others, and it helps bring them around to our way of thinking. When I was writing my book, Beyond the Obvious, I took the advice of others and had the entire manuscript reviewed by one of the leading fact-checkers from a major New York newspaper. I wanted to avoid the post-publication embarrassment of having someone point out some factual errors, or worse, find out that I had unintentionally revealed some confidential information of HP or one of its clients. The fact-checker was told that every story in reference had to be supported by public information. If it could not be validated with publicly available facts, it was pulled from the manuscript. In hindsight, it is one of the best decisions I have ever made. In one story, the fact-checker came back with a change. In a story about innovating under pressure, I used the story of the Apollo 13 disaster and how Mission Control came together and innovated a solution for the air scrubber. In the story, I told how they had used items in the command and lunar module to construct a device to remove the carbon monoxide. One item I listed was a sock. The fact-checker pointed out that I must have based the story on the movie. She was correct, but how did she know? The actual item was a piece of towel, and that the sock reference was a mistake in the Apollo 13 film. The film got it wrong, and the fact checker caught it. I fixed the manuscript, and I have used fact checkers ever since. The first step to translating your idea into disruptive innovations is to convince others to see your ideas as you see them. If you present your ideas with humbleness of attitude, linked with overwhelming logic, you'll be way down the path of attracting the support you need. So what part of the story are you telling about your ideas based on absolute truth? Whatever that is, stick with it. Everything else should be presented as the thoughts, dreams, and the hypothesis it is. Remember the saying, make sure your mind is in gear before you set your mouth or pen in motion. And even then, it's a good idea to proceed with a certain amount of caution so that you don't run over somebody. I'm Phil McKinney, and thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join in. If you have any comments or suggestions, drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com. Beyond this show, I write about my personal experiences of being in the innovation game for the last 2 decades. Topics include innovation, creativity, culture, team building, metrics, frustrations, leadership, and how to win. You can find that content over at philmckinney.com. You can also find out information about my book, Beyond the Obvious, including extensive excerpts over at beyondtheobvious.com. You can find hardcover, digital, and audio versions of my book on Amazon or wherever you get your books from. Now, the reason I started this show back in 2005 was to pay back my early mentor. My first mentor, Bob Davis, invested an immense amount of time in training and coaching me, which had a major impact on my career. When I went back and asked him how I could pay him back, he laughed and said I couldn't. I had to pay it forward. If I could ask for a favor, could you help me pay it forward? How? 1, by giving us a rating wherever you get your podcast, as that helps spread the word. And 2, by telling others about the show. If you want to be part of the conversation between the shows, I hang out in the Innovators community on Slack. The Innovators community is a private community of vetted innovators who help each other succeed. Check it out at theinnovators.community. This episode of Killer Innovations was produced by the Innovators Network. You can find the show notes and the entire show catalog going back to 2005 at killerinnovations.com. I'll talk to you next week, and in the meantime, go out and change the world with your killer innovation. Bye-bye.